I mean, straight off the bat, first, we'll dive into it, James. Where did this all begin? This is your first book as much as it is Troy's first audiobook. Where did this idea come from? What made you want to piece this together as your first book?
It's also my first sci-fi professionally. So I was coming off a movie that was a really arduous process. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a writer director in Hollywood for decades, and I just had this woman there was a woman on set who spotted this tendency of mine to describe scene after scene and moment after moment in terms of Ripley and Hicks or Han and Leia or, the Predator or whatever. It was always she was like sci-fi after sci-fi after sci-fi. And she pointed that out. And I knew I needed a change, a pivot. And I come from Silicon Valley. I've always been imagining a brain-computer interface that has the capabilities of the Matrix, but it's a commercial product.
The wet wire,
how the world,
all that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And just how that interface would feel and look and change the world and the technology that would be required to get there. And then I had this character in my heart who had just gone through unspeakable trauma. And a number of them, it just started building outwards. And then it just exploded one night. And it came out fast and furious, kind of like a bunch of prose. And it was going to be a script. These was all background documents, kind of these short story bios that was going to be world building. So, kind of everything was set in terms of when things happen or whatever. I come from true crime and historical stuff. So it was kind of writing my own future history. And I showed some of those things to people when I was rewriting what eventually became a script that was circulating and ready to go to market. And there was just crazy response that there was something a lot bigger here. And I kept writing, it kept growing, and it took this form. This frame narrative is basically, the heist time stuff that takes place in the fall of the accelerated 2051. That was the script. And all the character rewind, origin story chapters, the way that kind of the structure breaks out. I've naturally got Rashomon in my heart, and it just kind of fell together. It came together.
And the world building is absolutely phenomenal. For the book and the audiobook as well, Troy, the way that you bring these characters to life is absolutely fantastic. From your side, you said this is your first audiobook. I'm curious to know why this is your first audiobook and why you've gone for Grand Theft AI to make you break into this portion of, this area of voice acting. What pulled you into Grand Theft AI?
I think a lot of it is the jobs that people always ask me is like, well, how did you get started in this? I'm like, this was not something that I set out to do. Like I have been stumbling towards this inexorably since the beginning. And I think that the one advantage that I have is that I'm able to recognize an opportunity. Whereas, and I'm dumb enough and lack the formal education that often will saddle someone with fear. And so I'm just like, why not? I'll just figure it out.
Yeah.
And being someone I'm an avid reader, and I've always been a reader. And so to me, I like experiencing stories, and I can experience a different kind of story by reading it, by watching it, by playing it, or by listening to it. And so audiobooks, especially when you have long commutes and you're stuck on the 405 for hours, even more so than podcast often, which I love conversation. But to me, an audiobook is a way for me to utilize my imagination in almost a passive way because it's being told to me. And as a storyteller, I really respect and admire good storytelling. So I know what I like, and I know what has turned me off in an audiobook. And so for me, when I stepped in there, I was like, I've never done this before. I called a bunch of my friends. I was like, you've done this. And one piece of advice that several friends gave me was like, remember, it's not live. And I was like, that's so helpful to be able to use kind of the skill sets that I've had with doing games or animation or TV or film and go, remember, there's an edit button. And James is actually really surprised that I did this. And I think so is everyone at Blackstone too. I was reading as I was going, because to me, I wanted to try and at least capture the experience of someone reading this. And so there were many times we get to the end of the chapter and I was like, wait, what? And they're like,
you're like skimming ahead, you know.
I mean, you would think that I would. And, you know, sometimes, yeah, we get some stumbles because of that. But for me, we burned through this book, man, because it's such the story is so compelling, and to me, the characters are real. So I didn't have to do much. This wasn't, you know, how do you bring these characters to life? I was like, they're alive, they're real. And to me, it's just read the story. And if I, as someone who is reading it, can hopefully convey that as I'm reading it to someone who is reading it, then I've done my job. But to me, this was one of the most unique opportunities for me as a storyteller to try to tell a story in a different way.
Yeah. And I mean, like you say about how you digest and you consume things, because I'll hold my hands up and be transparent. This was my first audiobook too. I've never listened to an audiobook before this. I didn't know what to expect going in. I don't really get down with podcasts and things, but the transformation, like you say, the characters, they come to life. And, you know, and the emotion that you pour into them is phenomenal. Like, one of my favorite characters in the book is Otto. And the way you voice him, it's so gravelly and so raw and so powerful. Like, that guy terrifies me. He terrifies me, you know? And you can feel his aura coming through, you know? But at the same time, you've got such a mix, and some of the accent work. So like Quinn, you know, there's some British voice accents in there as well. Voice accents? Some British accents in there. You've got Quinn with the Irish. You've got even the feminine characters. Everything is portrayed so perfectly that I'm sitting there and I feel like I'm listening to a whole cast of people in my ear. And as the story unravels, you get to know these people, and like you say, they feel real. You know, it's phenomenal, the work that you guys combined. You know, James with the source material, you've got Troy with the voice work. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And
if I may, I want to add and attribute some credit to James, because this is where someone who is a filmmaker and is a director, not just a writer, where this component of his skill set shines. I could tell he's worked with actors before, because I've worked with writers, and typically writers are going to not only imbue their perspective onto the framework by which the actor is operating in, but be very precious and demanding. And James was very hands-off. There was no, this is what it's going to, you need to have this is how it's going to sound, and this is the voice, this is anything. It was really just us getting in there, and whatever spontaneously came out, I was like, how's this feeling with everybody? Is this right? They're like, this is great. This is working perfectly. And so there was sometimes we had to go back and go, hey, we need to clip out what this guy sounds like, because we need to remember, because there's so many characters and each character is incredibly unique. We were having to track those. And I know a lot of people like use color coding. If they see Baz, they're going to make it red. If they're, that's going to make it green or whatever. And for me, it was just like, the characters to me already felt so real. There was not, oh, remember, this is who this character is. It just was extant. Like who they were as a person, as a human, was incredibly extant. So I have to give him credit, because he really just kind of let us go and explore this. And I'm glad to hear that for you, it landed.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And James, you know, we talk about the realism aspect and going back to the world building. It's so... The whole time I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, this is our future. You know, the potential for this to be our future is insane. I know we talk about the wet wire and the wafers and the technology like that. And then we look at things like even the legal side of things, like all of the acts, like anti-augmentation and the blockchain, the universal monitoring, all these things that you wrote in. And then pulling in the brands, you know, Amazon and iPhone and Uber. You mentioned like Musk, Bezos. It's so believable, if you know what I mean. Like, from your perspective, like what goes into that? How did you piece all that together? How long did it really take you to kind of pull all these elements together off of obviously you had inspiration, but you've built this from the ground up?
I think the world build came pretty quick. It just was about how to get from what was here out there. And it felt like every time a tentacle would go, it would always ride a character. So if there was something that needed to like be, a technology that you needed to understand for the story to be told, and that was where really kind of the explanation. Sorry, that was where something I should have deactivated. That was where a lot of the story was dictated, was how to define the world. But I think the world building all in was probably 6 months or so. I think getting that to paper, the book, the whole project took quite a bit longer to get from like the first keystroke or inspiration to what you've read. But yeah, I don't know if I completely answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's about it. Yeah. And going back to yourself, Troy, we're talking about the characters, and we had a note earlier on about, obviously your work in games. I had a question that I'm really interested to see what your answer is taking Baz Covain, comparing him to the last 20 years of characters you've done. I'm wondering if you think there's anyone in particular who you could compare him to.
I think that, not speaking for James, but I think the role of all of us as storytellers is to create a character that's wholly unique, that feels fresh. It's like, I've never seen the world through this person's eyes before. But at the same time, we can't go too far, because the point of a story is empathy. And can I tell you my worldview through this story so that by the end of it, you have learned something about yourself? So we as storytellers want to create characters that feel unique, but also have a sense of familiarity, so that we go, I understand that. I understand what he's going through. I've experienced loss. So I don't know if I could compare him to anybody else. And at the same time, I could find the commonality. I mean, we could, who am I thinking of? Joseph, oh my gosh, Hero of a Thousand Faces. Why am I drawing a blank?
That one.
Campbell.
Oh.
We could go Campbellian on this and show you how, Baz is everyone and everyone is bad. One of my favorite quotes is Ralph Waldo Emerson, where he says that all of humanity, or all of history exists for the sake of a single person. Like, the reason why we look at something and the reason why we want to experience a story is to find in it the truth that says, yes, I have felt that too. It's the same reason why we turn up the radio when we're going through a breakup, and that Whitesnake song just speaks to us. So for me, I could look and see how this character is so very similar to the tragedy and the triumph and the accomplishments and the tribulations of every character I've ever played. But also, I feel like every character in this is incredibly unique because of the world that they're living in and the way that they see it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was, if I'm honest, when it comes to the comparison piece, I was going to lean towards Booker DeWitt, which is weird why it started off with us talking about Bioshock Infinite. But yeah, that makes complete sense. That's absolutely fantastic. And on Baz, I do have, so I'm not sure if I might have missed it, maybe. I don't think I have, but there's a bit earlier on in the book where that we're trying to figure out what Baz is short for. And I don't think that's ever explained what Baz is short for. And I don't know if you have an explanation, James, as to what Baz is actually short for. Because as soon as I read that, it's been on my mind ever since. I'm saying bazooka, but I don't know. It could be anything, really.
No. Can I guess?
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, it's...
Because there's not an answer in the book.
Okay.
Or is this... I don't remember hearing it.
It's on page 12.
It's that early on?
He answers that question.
I thought he answered sarcastically.
Isn't it Balthazar?
Sebastian Covain.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But
so there we are.
Yeah, no. But I was going to answer without saying it was in there, and then I'm like, it didn't get cut, did it?
It's a true mystery. Oh, okay. Sebastian.
Yeah, it's on page 12, three quarters down. Baz is short for Sebastian, on you are. That was his. I always had those two is the engine to the entire project. This was like, I really did I did a lot of true crime stuff. There was a lot of a lot of energy and passion devoted to kind of condemned souls, so to speak. And this was really, the idea of like a vibrant love story where you have two damaged, lost souls who come together and are each other's catalyst to heal and survive. I think I had the names. I know I had the names Baz and Rhea before I had any idea what the etymology of it.
Yeah.
And so, it just was, I think that for writers, you placehold your names, right? Because at first maybe they don't have a name. I mean, some people will have the name right away, but like when you find the name, whether it starts there or it's a journey, but once that name locks in, that is probably the single most important decision from my point of view, to find the voice and the movement. And like, as he described, I was a cinematographer first, but professionally, I was a director, and then a screenwriter because I had to, and then a novelist because I don't know why that happened.
I'm glad it did. I'm glad it did.
Yeah, well, I'm glad. I'm just honored that you spent me and Troy got 10 and a half hours of your life. It's such a, someone was saying, how does this compare to movies with audiences? It doesn't compare.
Right.
Like when you are in a movie, maybe you'll sneak in on your opening day, or if you ever go to a test screening, enduring the audience response to a test screening versus like at a book fair, or, you're meeting someone who's read your book. They didn't give you 2 hours in a dark room where they just sat there and watched a screen. Like they sat there and like, this was days of coming back. Like I read a bad review of the book.
Sweet.
And they drilled in on the ending, right? And how much they hated the ending.
But they got to it.
Yeah.
I was
Preach,
like,
brother.
not only did they finish it and hate it, but then they wrote about it online.
Yeah, man.
I was like, dude, I did my job. I was like, that just was the big, and I remember Abel Ferrara, this filmmaker, I was at the NYU, lifetimes ago, whatever. And he sat in front of us and he was like, I don't care if you like the movie or hate the movie, as long as if I made you feel anything, I did my job, And I wasn't, Abel was able, and I just was like, huh. And those words ring so much, like with books, like because people just put it down.
Yeah.
Like if you finish the book, like it's such an honor. It's such the idea that like, someone like I share my dreams. Someone goes on this journey that I concocted. There's no, the outlook, Troy notwithstanding, like, and this is a fellow voice, literally, right? Like, so we're like, I got everything 180 degrees in that direction. You got everything, we're back to back on when the audiobook happened. There's like, it's not like you sit there and you go to your cinematographer or your department head or your sound mixer, your composer, and you're like trying to say like, could you play it this way?
Right.
Right. Or like, I really want something it's like, dude, it's,
here you go.
There's one name up there. Right.
Yeah.
It's like there's zero separation between me and the reader, or zero really with Troy and the listener. So that immediacy of, I know Troy, we're both used to an art form where there's this scroll, crawl at the end that you leave. You know, that like when you're watching a Marvel or Star Wars movie, it comes to that part where like it opens up to like 12 columns and there's thousands of people.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, my fiance, she's not in one of those columns, but she's, you know, an Academy Award winning set designer. She's in that. And that, you know, it's crazy to evolve from a place, to move from a place where you have that many, you know, master's degree in industrial design, site managed, you know, museum sites, and then went to Hollywood to become a set designer and is part of this huge apparatus that are like wildly more talented in every department than you are. And you're just collaborating with hundreds of people. And then next thing you know, it's just like print,
that's it.
And they put that on the book stand. So sorry for the tangent.
No, it's phenomenal.
Man, that is the point.
Yeah, that's it.
I think that most of the people who are quick to criticize, I know from personal experience, I remember sitting at a table read once and as an actor, and I said, you know, I've got some thoughts about this scene. And the writer was there, and they said, hey, man, I don't want to hear your feedback if you haven't sat down to a blank white page and a blinking cursor and written the words fade in. And I was like, touche. Like, I can talk to you about my performance, I can talk to you about my perspective, but when it comes to the text, when it comes to the writing, if I haven't sat down and done it, maybe I don't need to be so critical. And so to me, the thing that I love about what you just said, James, is that it reinforces the fact that whenever somebody just following the timeline of a thing being made, from someone seeking out inspiration to being able to process and synthesize that idea through their life experience and talent to be able to make that thing manifest and tangible into something else that somebody else believes in enough to put it out into the machine, right? Because that's a whole other thing. To find a publisher that goes, yeah, we're willing to add this to our slate and to put our machine behind it and add the resources that's going to get this out to a far more, you know, diverse and wide mass audience than you could ever reach on your own. And then for people to actually then consume that material all the way and then have a perspective on it, as you said, to sit down and go, I feel so, and this has left such an indelible mark on me that I must comment. That's a thing, dude. And most people who walk on this planet will never experience that. That experience is reserved for a select few of people that go, for good or bad, I'm going to do this thing. I have an idea and I'm going to see it through. There's just so many opportunities for failure along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
amen. And I would counter what he just said, that like, because I have so much respect for what Troy, as a writer, the writer's reaction, who I'd have no idea, no interest in knowing, but that's I always am fascinated by people's, I don't want to, you know what I mean? I don't want to call what I foul, but you know, I'm just always fascinated by notes and reactions, especially when they conflict, because they always do, with other people who read it and respond. And then you're trying to decipher which ones you listen to and which ones you don't, because there's no doubt there's times where you're like, God, that is indelibly, why didn't I think of that? Right. That's a great idea. I got to go and implement that. And then someone else might have something that's like, that's a pretty good idea too. But in order to get both those ideas, one of them, they can't, and then I got to kill something, so that whole process, and then it can turn into like insanity, and it's not fun. But so it flips on a coin so quickly. But, I love listening to people's responses, even though, like if Stephen King had something in one of my favorite books is It. And he's like, one of the historians, like, yeah, you should read those journals, throw them in the trash can, but read them first. Anyways.
That's Daniel Lavoie, man. It's not about breaking the rules. It's about ignoring them. It's about understanding that there are a system of rules that you can use if it works. I also think that the thing that I love is while it does sound like, this was just exploded and spontaneous, this is a story that's been cooking inside James for a long time. And to be able to have it come together and coalesce and culminate in a time right now where this is the conversation, I think it's not even opportune. It's like fortuitous. It's like it's fate. And the thing that I appreciate is when someone wants to create. I love alternate history, as you said. You're writing your future history. It's super hard to unplug from reality and go, well, this is now high sci-fi. This is now something that is moving into the territory of the unbelievable. And this is so incredibly. And I use this word very sparingly because I think it's overused. It's not grounded. It's believable. And there's a difference, because grounded, I don't want grounded. My life is grounded. I want to read about somebody else's experience that is somehow remarkable, which is why I'm reading about it or experiencing it or watching it or playing it. But the thing is, it's not about being grounded. It's about, is it believable? And I believe all of it. I believe the way that the world worked, and I believe the characters that were inside of it.
Which is what I was alluding to. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I got distracted and I realized what I was about to say when I completely lost the train of thought. And that is this. So, the human condition has a lot of universality to it, right? For example, and then you go from the general to the specificity, and those details that root us in. Like when I write a character, one of the things I'm always asking the character myself is, what song did you slow dance to at your prom?
Oof.
So I don't even know if there is a prom in the UK. So I would have to probably rephrase
we have those. We have those. Yeah.
We talk about proms, isn't it?
It's not as like ostentatious or whatever, but yeah, we have them.
But right there, right? So like in America, right, that becomes, it roots you in, right? And so suddenly you're like, I didn't go to prom. Why? That suddenly creates these details, right? Because I was, I wasn't that kind of kid. I wasn't going to go to prom. I was like this. Or I was in a different country. We don't have proms. They're called this. And, and so then the universality of what prom means to me moves through a series of details that shift into something, right? And so when I was writing true crime, and something you would find, there is a crime scene with a date and an hour, right? And so there's something on television when that crime scene went, and you go buy the TV guide from that 1981 and look at it and be like, oh my God, that was the episode in, Rockford Files or whatever. And this is exactly what's happening. And it infuses so much life and detail into what you're writing. So when I was writing true crime, it would be like magazines and music and everything from the weekend, or historical, like, I did a Norman Mailer adaptation that was the Red Scare. So it was very McCarthy and stuff, even the historical fiction. And so that was where, to give something a date, right? If someone gets a birth date, for me, I'm not a huge astrology person. And yet I'm that person that's always like, they always seem to be very accurate to people's person, like Geminis and Leos and Capricorns, right? So as soon as you give them a birth date, for me, that just means like, what, Billy Ray Valentine, Capricorn, like it just starts to root in. And that was where building those future histories created this vibrancy and flesh in my heart, where I knew the general, right? Because cyberpunk is something that I have always loved.
Yeah.
But to give it a situation of how do we go from, and what for me was the origin was Move 37. I don't know if you've ever heard of
That's not familiar to me, no.
So Move 37 is a moment in 2016 in the evolution of AI, in which a AI named AlphaGo, that was built by a company in UK named DeepMind before Google bought them, AlphaGo was the AI that beat the Grandmaster Lee Sedol in the game of Go. So do you know what I'm now describing?
Roughly, yeah.
So anyways, the game of Go is that little, those little stones, the white and black stones. And the way the story goes is there are more moves in the game of Go than there are atoms in the known universe. So that's a lot. And so what
a few
IBM's Big Blue, I think it was called, when it beat Kaspersky or whatever, the chess master back in '95, it used this piece of code, this called a brute force attack, which is basically it sifted through every single chess move possible and chose the strategically. You can't do that in the game of Go. It's theoretically, it's just too many moves. So it had to be a computer that learned the game. And to beat the Grandmaster, they figured was, in the 2030s. That was when it was scheduled in the minds of AI. And so Move 37 is game, I think it's 2, right? And Move 37, you can actually watch it, I think technically on my socials, but you can go and watch it like on YouTube, because it's out in Asia. It's like the NFL or soccer in UK. Like they got the play-by-play and the announcers, and this person is Troy Aikman, if you don't know what that means, but whatever, and so you've got these announcers who are announcing this move, and they do a double take, a triple take, and he's moving it on a fake board, because it's a move that's never been done before.
Yeah.
And it shocked the world, and it's been described as creative and alien, innovative. And I think that was the origin of when I was knowing I was going to do something in the world, of futuristic sci-fi cyberpunk. And I had these two characters, and I knew I wanted kind of a 9/11 security apparatus that was everywhere, ubiquitous, so that you couldn't turn this off when it was in your head.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something like 100 people that can, or something like that. I think it's written that if you're a certain age, like Quinn, there's certain people that just don't have that, because they're so old or whatever,
The grandfather clause.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. Yeah. But listen, I mean, this is I could talk about this for hours on end. I really have one last question before we wrap. It's more of a like a check-in. I read that this isn't the end. You're doing another one. You've got a follow-up that you're working on, I understand. Do you have any expectations of how long that's going to take to materialize? Is Troy coming back to
I can answer that question. I can answer that.
Okay. He's already signed on.
Yeah, it's written.
It's written. Oh, okay. It's already done. Nice.
Yeah. In fact, I finished well, listen, it's never done until you're reading it. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There's a version of it that's written that is not my first draft. It's out and out of my hands for now. And there was something else. I'm forgetting again, but I finished it actually the week my daughter was born.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that was kind of this, and that was also when we got our pub date for the first book. So it was that's
a very busy week.
A lot of lives being born in
Absolutely.
so many different ways. So hopefully, I'm assuming sometime next year it'll hit the stands.
Okay.
And I think we're gonna. It's all about guys like you and readers, getting this book to a place where the sequel is salivated for. And it's time to bring it out.
And Troy, you coming back on?
I would love to. It's such a cliche, but it's like, the real thing was the friends we made along the way. And what I'm honored that someone chose me to in any way be a part of the telling of their story, literally. But more than anything, I'm grateful as a reader, as someone who loves books, especially loves sci-fi and interesting takes on current conversations. I'm glad that I read this book. I'm honored to have been a part of it, but I'm also super grateful that I found a partner that I want to do a bunch of stuff with. Like that to me is the best part, is finding a fellow storyteller that I want to tell more stories with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, ditto.
Absolutely. And if it goes live action, are you Baz? When are you gonna,
Oh no, dude! I'm like James and I will
We'll be sitting in
argue
the
on
chairs.
this.
yeah.
I can see. I mean, I think that live action is always, people automatically go, how would you adapt this as a movie? Me being someone who loves games, I'm always thinking in terms of like, how would I adapt this in the game? Because as I'm reading it, this is a story that I want to play as well.
Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe there's something there.